Okay, so I call this meeting to order. Welcome council, staff, and residents. We do have, in fact, quorum, so I declare this meeting open. To start the meeting, we do the land recognition statement, and it's my privilege to do so this evening. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. So I'll turn to the clerk for opening remarks.
Public meeting under the Planning Act, Wednesday, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid public meetings. A hybrid hearing involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject application. Decorum. Public meetings under the Planning Act are formal meetings requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you're live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is to follow the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So council's had a chance to review the agenda. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Councillor Eckert, Councillor Kerr, all in favor? So carried. And does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I've noted this. That brings us to our opening remarks. Town of Pelham application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1039 Church Street, file number AM-06-2023. Zoning bylaw amendment to permit a 3-story, 18-unit apartment dwelling on the subject property. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting for informing the public in respect to the proposed amendment. The public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of the meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on July 21st, 2023. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation to follow. If the person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore, any comments received will be considered by Council. Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have our senior planner with us to represent this file.
Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Larocque.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor and members of Council, members of the public. This public meeting is for an application for zoning bylaw amendment. The application is for property located at 1039 Church Street. This property is located on the east side of Church Street, south of Canberra Road, and the application is to rezone the lands from the residential 1 zone to the site-specific residential multiple 2 and environmental protection 1 zones. This is the proposed site plan that was submitted with the application. It shows an area for a proposed future lot for single detached dwelling fronting on Church Street. The creation of that lot would be subject to an application to the Committee of Adjustment in future. And it shows the 18-unit, 3-story apartment dwelling at the northeast portion of the property, visitor parking along the private driveway, and resident parking to the south. This area in the southeast portion of this L-shaped property is reserved for the buffer from the woodland, the stream that's located on the adjacent property and its buffer. And those are the lands that are to be rezoned to Environmental Protection 1 for long-term protection. These are the preliminary building elevations that were submitted with this application. This is the north and western portions of the building. So the main entrance on the west side here, and the north side of the building, this is what would be visible from those existing residential uses that are on Welland Road. In terms of the planning policy framework for this application, it's located within a settlement area in the provincial policy statement. Settlement areas are where intensification and redevelopment is promoted, and that intensification and redevelopment is to accommodate a significant supply and range of different housing options and use existing and planned infrastructure. Properties within the delineated built-up area in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. This is where at least 50% of all new residential development is to occur. And the Niagara Region's official plan designates this property as being within the delineated built-up area. There's an annual intensification rate that's been assigned to the town of Pelham, and so we are to accommodate 25% of all new residential units within our urban boundaries, our existing urban boundaries. And that's in an effort to increase housing choice and housing affordability across the region and make sure that future housing needs are met. There are policies in the region's official plan that also encourage a range and mix of densities, lot and unit sizes, as well as housing types. There's the encouragement for affordable and attainable housing as well, and housing that meets the needs of people throughout their entire lifespan. The town of Pelham's official plan designates the property as being within the urban living area and the built boundary. This designation permits a full range of residential uses, and our town official plan currently indicates that 15% of our housing growth is to be within those existing built boundaries of Fawn Hill and Fenwick. That's now been increased to the 25% that was included in the Niagara Region official plan. And policy B115 provides guidance to council when considering a zoning bylaw amendment for a new apartment dwelling. That policy states that council shall be satisfied that the proposal respects the character of adjacent residential neighborhoods in terms of height, bulk, and massing, that it can be easily integrated with surrounding land uses, that it will not cause or create traffic hazards or an unacceptable level of congestion on existing roads, and that it's located on a site that has adequate land area to incorporate required parking, recreational facilities, landscaping, and buffering on site. The town's zoning bylaw zones the property residential 1. The R1 zone permits a single detached dwelling, a semi-detached dwelling, a bed and breakfast, a home occupation, second dwelling units, and accessory buildings and structures to those uses. The requested zoning change would rezone a portion of the property to the site-specific residential multiple 2 zone to permit the apartment use, as well as that environmental protection 1 zone in the southeast portion of the property for the woodland buffer, the buffer to the stream. There are some requested site-specific regulations in the residential multiple-use zone, and that they recognize the siting of the building on the site plan, as well as the L shape of the lot. So those requests include a minimum lot frontage of 9.4 meters, a reduction to the minimum lot area to 232 square meters per unit, a recognition of the siting of that building with a 78-meter front yard, which is, of course, not typical, but based on the location and the size or the shape of this property, that's where the building's being sited on their plan. A minimum rear yard of 6.5 meters. There are no changes being requested to the maximum building height or the lot coverage requirements or the landscape strip requirements in the residential multiple-use zone. There is a request to reduce the landscape strip because there's a rear yard swale. It's normally required to be 3 meters. In this case, it will be 1.5 meters as shown on their site plan. And finally, to locate the parking area 1.5 meters to the side lot line. Agency comments have been received on this application, and they include no objections from the Niagara Region Growth Strategy and Economic Development Department. They will provide conditions of approval for a future site plan approval application if the zoning application is approved. The Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority had no comments, but they advised that a work permit would be required if there are any storm outlets to discharge into the adjacent watercourse, which they regulate. Town Public Works provided some technical comments for future servicing and a future consent application for the single detached lot. Fire and Emergency Services indicated that the fire route shown on the plan will be required to extend to the last parking stall, so just a little bit further than what they've shown so far, and that all units will be required to be sprinklered. And Bridge Gas advised they have no objection. And no comments have been received up until this time, though I recognize there will be likely speakers following my presentation. And a number of technical reports were received regarding this application. They include a planning justification and impact analysis report addendum, a background environmental study report, a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment. We have also received the acknowledgement letter from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport for that archaeological assessment, a phase 2 environmental site assessment, functional servicing report, stormwater management report, and a conceptual site servicing and grading plan. Those reports and plans are available for viewing on the town's website, engagingpelham.ca/1039 Church Street. And no decisions or recommendations are being made at this meeting tonight. Once all of the comments have been received, planning staff will review them and prepare a recommendation report for council's decision at a later date. And if anyone wishes to receive notices regarding this application in the future, please contact me. And you're welcome to contact me for questions as well. Shannon Larocque, Senior Planner, my telephone number 905-980-6661, and email slarocque@pelham.ca. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Larocque. And now we turn over to the applicant's presentation, and the agent for the applicant, Susan Smythe.
Good evening. Thank you for me being a little tardy. I was caught in a little traffic on 20. So my apologies.
Welcome to our world.
So members of committee council, those in attendance here and also virtually. My name is Susan Smythe. I am a senior planner with Quartec Group. I am working with the applicant owner, Mr. Lucas Lucetta, who is joining us virtually. We are both local residents here in the town of Pelham. I wanted to mention that I did hand deliver an information brochure on July 12th to all adjacent residents, as well as houses along Welland Road and those along Church Street. introducing myself, answering any questions and or concerns that they may have. I did have a chance to speak with some people and address their concerns, mostly pertaining to some previous tree removals, as well as the potential location of the building in proximity to their views. In terms of written correspondence, I have not received anything to date. So I do want to just thank Ms. Larocque for a presentation, and I will just quickly run through some additional details on the project, in addition to the requested amendments for this infill development located in Fenwick. So in terms of background information, the lot area, the collective lot area right now as it stands is approximately 4614 square meters, 0.46 hectares in size. It has a lot frontage of 21.33 meters on Front Street. The site is surrounded currently by residential uses. The proposal will include a severance of one single detached lot on the south side, and it will remain as such to accommodate a single dwelling lot. It will have a lot area of approximately 434 square meters and a lot frontage of 12 meters. The lot frontage for the new lot is deficient by 3 meters, 9.8 feet, from the R1 zone regulation. Therefore, it requires the site-specific amendment to address that deviation. Despite the reduced frontage, there is sufficient space still available for a single-car driveway and a front yard, and we do not expect that there will be any visual impacts along that street face with this reduction. The new lot is an adequate size and can accommodate a house of up to 217 square meters, or approximately 2336 square feet in size, and that would meet the R1 zone maximum 50% lot coverage. The balance of the proposed development will include the low-rise apartment that will be a standard condominium and include 18 units. It will be a 3-story or 13 meters high in building height. The lot area for this portion of the development will be 4171 square meters or 0.41 hectares with a lot frontage of 9.4 meters. This frontage will allow for a 6 to 6.3 meter wide private road, which will lead to the building and parking at the rear of the site. It will also accommodate a 1.5 meter or 4.92 feet sidewalk on the south side, as well as a 1.5 meter wide landscaping strip along the north side of the lot. The apartment building footprint will be approximately 600 square meters or 6,458 square feet, and it will have 2 exiting stairwells. No elevators are required for this type of building. There will be 6 units per floor, with majority dedicated to 2-bedroom dwelling units. They will range from 875 to 970 square feet for the 2-bedroom and 730 to 800 square feet for 1-bedroom unit. There will be 17 parking spaces dedicated to the residents, 1 accessible parking space, and 6 visitor parking spaces. This is a ratio of 1.3 parking spaces per unit, and this exceeds the minimum 1.25 under the current zoning bylaw. In addition, there will also be bicycle parking. There will be 18 dedicated outdoor spaces. So on the proposed site plan you see before you, I've indicated, if you see the delineation of the dotted red line, that is that single dwelling lot. To the right of that, if you look, you'll see numbers 17 to 24. So that is allocated as the visitor parking spaces. Adjacent to that, you will see some area dedicated for a mailbox location as well as snow storage removal. The road that leads down kind of like a T formation, you will see the location of the building in the furthest northeast corner. The purpose for this is to essentially remove itself from the environmental constraint areas that you see in the image delineated by a darker green, and then there's some hatching lines, and that's just to identify the Coil Creek watershed as well as the woodland feature that's designated as a feature under the regional plan. The lighter green area is a 10-meter wide vegetation buffer. This area was identified and confirmed by a site visit with the region as well as environmental consultant that we visited on site approximately about a year ago. So essentially, with that being a constraint, as well as being cognizant and sensitive to those adjacent properties along Church Street, this location was the ideal positioning of the building. This slide essentially provides the requested amendments. So R1 pertains to that single dwelling lot. And in this particular requested amendment for that lot, the request would be a reduction in the lot frontage, so from the 15 meters to 12 meters. Essentially, all other provisions and requirements can be met by the new lot. When we move towards the balance of the property that will be pertained to the proposed low-rise apartment building, it will be changing from the R1 to an RM2 zone. It will have a site-specific provision applied, and in that, the red box delineates what are the reductions. So minimum lot frontage, so if it was to be 30 meters, the request here is 9.4, and as I indicated, that 9.4 accommodates, again, those buffer strips, the sidewalk, as well as the 6-meter wide roadway. In terms of maximum front yard, in this circumstance, because of the long linear private road that leads to the back, we've accommodated, well, essentially 78 meters is that distance. In terms of minimum rear yard, 12 meters is the requirement. And I'm just going to kind of go back to this drawing here. So you see in the blue lettering rear yard. Just to make mention is currently that area is open right now, but it is intended for future residential use as well. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen any future or the proposed plans for that. So in our opinion, we think the positioning of the building in this location is better suited than providing the building closer to those existing on Church Street. So increasing that distance to the private amenity spaces on Church Street, in our opinion, was better suited in this circumstance. So that is the requirement for the reduction of the rear yard. In terms of these additional requirements, the landscape strip, section 315, this essentially is to have a landscape strip measured along the lot lines as it adjoins rear yard swales. And in this circumstance, 3 meters is a requirement. But as I alluded, we want to minimize any impediments to the buffer, to the environmental area. So the compromise was to essentially reduce it by 1.5. So that is essentially where those reductions are in the landscape strip, as well as the parking location. So I'm just going to go back again. So the parking's from 1 to 15, as you see. The 1.5 is essentially the lot line to those properties on Church Street to where the alignment of the parking spaces are. In terms of the reduction, we believe that there is still sufficient space, enough to accommodate a board-on-board fence, as well as any landscaping to buffer and screen from those properties adjacent. The balance of the green area, as per correspondence from the region as well as the conservation, it will be put into an EP zone, therefore having a long-term protection of that environmental area. So no development can occur there. This essentially is just the proposed elevations and renderings. There may be through the design phase, through a site plan, as well as a subsequent draft plan, of condominium. There may be some refinements made, but essentially the proposed building is going to be using brick, stone, wood accent features, making it an aesthetic building that can fit into the neighborhood fabric. So essentially the views here is the one facing Church Street. So if someone was driving along Church Street, they may see the one end of the building at the very back. And then there's the side entrance, so the north view, and then the east side view, which is the rear side of the building, which would be any future development to the east of this site. That would be their projected views. In terms of planning analysis for any new development proposal, it is weighted against provincial, regional, local policies. In this circumstance, in regards to this proposed development, we believe that development is consistent and conforms to the policies. It provides an opportunity for infill residential to assist the town and the region for the housing shortages that we face today. It contributes to the target of residential density, particularly that geared to Fenwick. And it provides a dwelling type that can accommodate different lifestyles and affordability. It provides an opportunity to efficiently connect to existing services and infrastructure in the area. This essentially is just a synopsis of what the next steps could be. In terms of the zoning bylaw application, we are here this evening to provide you with the information, answer any questions. Subsequent to this, we will be working with the town planning staff to address any comments or concerns that I can't address tonight. A recommendation will be brought forward for deliberation, and then the 20-day appeal period, moving towards site plan application. And in here I did not indicate draft plan of condominium, that is the likelihood as well of an additional approval application. Following clearing of conditions, it will be subject to building permits and construction. So that completes my presentation, and I can answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Yes. So does any counselor have any questions of the applicant? Okay, Counselor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was wondering, that area, I think there's probably a number of concerns about runoff. Water is always a problem for us. Light is another subject. What type of lighting are you going to have on the driveway? I see you have the signs there for the markings for the fire lanes and everything. Do you have any plans for that, or could you or the applicant tell us what the plans would be for lighting first of all?
Through to you, Chair. Yes, so in terms of the lighting plan, that is definitely something that will be a requirement under the site plan process, which is subsequent to the zoning bylaw. It will be forming part of the application in terms of elevation plans, as well as site servicing, a stormwater management plan. All of these plans will be provided during site plan. I will mention, however, that a functional servicing study, as well as the preliminary stormwater management, has been provided with this application. So there is additional information on how drainage will be addressed, and the detailed design will be at this site plan and draft plan of condominium stage. I do know that no approvals will be granted by the town's Public Works Department if we do not satisfy the regional and town's requirements.
Yeah. Thank you. Now to the runoff, the water. The site, I see that we have to have a work permit before anything goes into the feature there, the water feature. What about local neighboring yards and things? And will that be addressed in the stormwater plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. So no development approvals will be granted unless we meet the requirements that there is assurance no drainage impacts onto abutting properties. So that will be detailed during the site plan phase.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to make sure that's a concern of the residents, and I'd like to make sure that that's been taken into consideration. Another consideration is accessibility. Now, we don't have, there's no elevators in the three-story building. Is there a percentage of the units going to be accessible units? I suspect on the ground floor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Under the current Ontario Building Code, there's a percentage that needs to be dedicated to accessible barrier-free units, and that will be provided.
Okay. Thank you for that answer in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So any other councilors? Councilor Niznik?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I just wanted to ask about somewhere in a report, the garbage being dealt with. So the region will not pick up garbage at the curbside due to the size of the number of units that are there. So just wondering how, I didn't see that on your proposed site plan at the moment. What were you thinking there?
Sure, through to you, Mr. Chair. To address garbage collection, so the building could likely be accommodated for recyclable bin collection. You'll see there's a turning template movement diagram provided on the bottom corner. So that is not only to show a fire truck can fit, but also a regional waste collection. They have the T-turning radius. So if anything, the waste collection would be at that very top corner for the collection bins of waste and recyclable. For actual garbage, that would likely have to be done through a private pickup, and that would be done through the condominium.
So thank you. So, well, what I read was pretty clear that the region would not go into that driveway to collect anything. So I'm not sure, is that correct, or am I incorrect, Ms. Weens or Ms. LaRocque?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we'll just confirm that.
Okay. While you're looking that up, that's good. I had the question about the apartment or the accessibility as well. So just a little disappointed that an elevator would not be put in, even though it is 3 stories. I know even myself going up 3 stories, I'm huffing and puffing at my young, bright, vibrant age. But I guess if that's not in the it's not in the provincial code that happens, eh?
It's not a requirement for this type of building, no.
Right. But, you know, being the wonderful builder that he is, it might be something that he might reconsider if possible.
I can defer that to the client, to
Okay.
Mr. Luchetta.
I would
if you'd like to
appreciate
address.
if you could do that. Thank you.
Sure.
And then just another concern, the parking does seem, again, quite far away from entrances. So do you have a location where they can pull up, drop off things, and then go in and park and then come back and collect their things? Because, you know, lugging groceries and suitcases and that sort of thing, that's quite a walk.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so there are 2 entrances. So one is closer to the parking facility. You kind of see there's a main entrance at the very front building, and then there's a side entrance as well. I'm just going to kind of back up a bit. So where you see the area allocated for bicycle, that is where that one entrance is. So it is closer to the parking stalls. And the front main entrance is further north along the private road. So there is an entrance closest to the parking.
Mr. Chair, through you, the region has indicated that they will not pick up garbage at this site, so it will have to be dealt with through private contractor.
Thank you. So just want to build on that a little bit. So would the applicant look at putting in Moloch's containers then at the end of that T there?
Through to you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if Mr. Luchetta is willing to answer that question, but it definitely is a possibility, for sure. The location of it, that will have to be better defined as we work
Yeah,
through the
it just
design
seems like a
process.
more logical solution than bins and whatever. So just put that out as a comment. Councilor Niznik, are you finished? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So I did hear you mention fencing, so I assume that would be privacy fencing on the west side. But would it go completely around the entire property is, I guess, the good question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So along the perimeter of the development, with the exception of not going through the environmental constraint area, there will be some privacy fencing with any opportunity to also include landscape features. So for instance, ornamental grasses that are pretty tall, some can go 6 to 8 feet tall. Those things will also add to the screening, and those will be included in the landscape plan at the next phase.
Good, thank you very much. And just final question, I believe, is just for my own thinking, the driveway, so two cars can move up and down that road at the same time, the driveway, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So a 6-meter wide right-of-way for a private road is enough space for two-way traffic. And also to accommodate, 6 meters is the minimum to accommodate fire emergency vehicles as well. So that is a code requirement that we're being maintained.
You're done? I am. Are you sure? Okay. Thank you. Any other counselors? I just have I'll have one more question to add. I had some of the same concerns. Through the reading material, I read that a number of trees have been taken down on this lot already. They don't come back. There doesn't seem ample opportunity to do a lot of tree planting on this subject lot. Is there consideration that the applicant would plant trees elsewhere in the community to compensate for the loss of trees on this property?
Mr. Chair, so in respect to removals of trees, yes, the region and the applicant has been working out some of those issues, if you will. Some of the trees that were removed were evaluated by the biologists, and some of them were dead ash trees and had to eventually be removed anyway. In terms of tree removal and replacement, as per the site visit and additional correspondence with the regional environmental group, there will be a restoration or tree planting plan that will be provided at the time of site plan draft plan of condominiums. So there will be some restoration done on this site that can accommodate the requirements for both the region and likely the town.
Thank you for that. Councillor Olson, I see that you had some further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was wondering about the handicap parking spot there. There appears to be one here. I'm kind of wondering, that's probably going to be used all the time, I would imagine, by somebody in that building, and especially if we have two handicapped units in the building, which I think is the number that would be there. Would there be any chance of another handicap spot there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I'm looking at the site plan, I think there would be enough to accommodate definitely one more. If anything, I would think it'd be the space that's identified as maybe space 15.
Yeah.
I think there would be enough space to increase the width to make that accommodation. So yes, I think that definitely can be achieved.
And another accessibility question, if I might. Looking at the sidewalks, I see the end kind of on the west side, I guess. They end between the somewhere between the visitor parking and the building parking, and then on the other side there's sort of a disjointed thing which would make people cross the street, say with a walker or with a cane or something. I don't know whether they would be. So this is not representative, I guess, of where the sidewalk will be.
No, and through you to Mr. Chair, unfortunately, things like some of the drawing has been cut off a little bit, but so there would be a continuation. So the sidewalk would go right in front of the mailbox, to be quite honest. And then at that point, there would be either marking or something to that effect that would cross the private road into the front entrance of the building. To keep note as well, the tactile plates will also be provided just for the accessibility requirements. So yeah, this plan definitely needs a little bit of updates. to reflect really, in fact, what will be happening through the detailed design.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So any further questions from council one last time? Seeing none. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Smythe. And I'll turn it over to the deputy clerk at this point for.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I did notice that the applicant did unmute himself at one point. Perhaps he has some additional comments. I would just confirm before we proceed.
Okay,
Sorry, I
Mr.
was just going to
Lucetta.
say in relation to the garbage that we will be reviewing that, as Susan mentioned, at the time of detailed site plan approval. So we'll be looking at all the relevant options and choose the best path forward in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that does bring us to the public portion of the meeting. And we do have a member of the public joining us via Zoom that may be interested in providing comments. So I will turn to Mr. Atkinson, who I believe is joining us via phone. Mr. Atkinson, if you have any comments, now would be the time.
Mr. Atkinson, are you there? Okay.
He wasn't sure if he would be providing comments, so perhaps he's decided against it. I have asked him to unmute if he's interested. Perhaps we can circle back if he does change his mind. You may now open to the public gallery if you wish.
Yes, so if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to make comments or questions, now's your opportunity to do so. Yes, sir. Can you please step to the podium and state your name?
It's Larry Lethby, and I live at 1031 Church Street, and we adjacent to that property in question, the developer. I was just wondering what their grade is going to be, and if they're going to keep the same grade. It's like 6 or 7 feet higher than our property, existing property. If they're going to keep the same grade, or whether it's going to change. And the embankment on that little drainage ditch behind us, after they cut all the trees and tore it all up, it's all eroding. And whether they're going to take care of what they're going to do about that. And mostly about the height of the development, whether it's going to be, if they're going to leave it 6 or 7 feet higher than our property.
So does the applicant have any comments with respect to the grading?
I think that's a more detailed question for the engineers. Maybe Susan can speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to address your question. In terms of the grade, yeah, there is going to be further detailed design on that. In terms of it being that significantly higher, definitely grading has to occur on the site. I don't have the elevations with me, unfortunately, but that is definitely something I can provide. If you do leave your information, I can send you the drawing if you'd like.
And one further question was about a buffer zone. You said there was going to be a fence all around?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that was one of my questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions from the public? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Adam Arbor. I live at 1043 Church Street, which is be the north property for the entrance, directly across the road from the church. So I want to thank Ms. LaRocque for spending some time with me on the phone answering my questions, which was great because as with my other neighbor, there's quite a great difference between the north property and where the driveway is going to be. So I was a bit concerned about that, and I think Ms. LaRocque and I have that sorted, that's on my property, so that is good. A little concerned about the reduction of the frontage by cutting it in half from 3 meters to 1.5 meters, essentially at my neighbor's expense. So that's just a comment. And then the question I have is regarding the traffic, if there's going to be a traffic study on there. Church Street is become quite a raceway between the activities at Centennial Park, and now we're going to add these units, but then also the Montessori school that is very, very active during the school year, which is awesome to see. And just curious if there's going to be any sort of implications or investigation of the implications of traffic along there. And Church Street narrows quite a bit at Canberra Road, and Canberra Road narrows at Church Street. So it's a concerning area if we're going to introduce any more traffic. So just curious if that's going to happen.
So I'll ask that of planning staff if there's any consideration for a traffic study on this property.
Mr. Chair, through you, at this time, our public works staff have not requested a traffic impact study, but that is something that we can go back and discuss with them. Certainly, it can be a requirement as part of a site plan application.
Okay. Does that answer your questions significantly, or? Okay,
Sorry.
great.
That's awesome. And the other one is, and I don't want to be one of the NIMBYism people, but it seems like the frontage of that residential property is very, very much out of place on Church Street. Everybody has nice large lots, and now we're going to have a roadway and a very small lot with frontage on Church Street. It seems out of place. So just a comment. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Are you talking about that single-family dwelling thing on the driveway leading in? Is that what you're concerned about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's exactly what it is, because we're dividing the lot right now as the frontage stands is basically the width of all of our lots along Church Street, you give or take. And then now we're going to cut that in half, and it just seems like it's going to be out of place. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I guess I'm just going to pipe in and concur with Mr. Arbor that the intersection at Church Street and Canberra Road, as a result of this, probably should be looked at in more detail. I've never been a fan of how it was fully designed, and I'm never a fan of trying to make a left-hand turn off Canberra Road up Church Street if Johnson's farm trucks are coming down the road to make a right-hand turn. Everybody has to wait and it's basically one gets to turn, then the next person turns. It's almost like a three-way stop at times. So I think that's going to have to be looked at, especially adding this many additional vehicles. It'll be going in and out in a close proximity to that intersection. So I support his comments and hope that we can encourage staff to work with him on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else from the public have any comments to make? Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Olson, thank you. Mr. Barrister and I own the property directly east, and the town. Barbara's been instrumental. Shannon's been instrumental. I have had a meeting with the town about it. They have answered some of my questions, but I do want to relay to council that water as current, I know we have plans for the village in the future, but there's a lot of water that comes down Camberwell, down Baxter, through the Hildebrid property, across our property, and currently goes across a vacant lot. And that also goes just in front of this gentleman's property. So the water is definitely an issue, or at least a concern. So yes, please, if that would be taken into consideration. I know that eventually, from what I understand, we're going to have more developments as it's ongoing, but yes, the water is definitely going to be an issue. We'd like to keep that in mind. Thank you.
So, sir, I didn't want to interrupt you when you started off. Could you please state your name for the
I
record?
apologize. My name is Marcel Warren.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warren.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. Anyone want to make comments, further comments on the water? Ms. Weens?
Mr. Chair, through you, as Mr. Moran indicated, staff did meet with him, I believe it was last week, and we discussed with him kind of what some of the improvements are happening in this area, certainly with the redevelopment of the former fire hall site, and then if this development were to proceed, what would be required to manage the drainage on this property as well. And then there is additional diversion or collection of storm water with respect to additional storm sewers that are being installed that will also improve the situation. So it is happening a little, in pieces, but there is work that's underway to address certainly some of the stormwater management and the drainage issues, and Public Works is certainly aware of that, and there's quite a bit of work that is underway as we speak to try to address some of those concerns.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weens. Last call for public questions. Ms. Leach, has anyone called in at this point?
Through Mr. Chair, we have actually received an email. The email from Natalie states, general traffic concerns, traffic along 3 sides of the property of 1037 Church, pollution concerns from runoff of these roads, noise concerns from increased traffic, proposed private road is across from a current school/church parking lot and 100 meters from another tight intersection causing additional traffic concerns, as well as impact on current land and trees, large elevation discrepancy between the back of 1037 Church property and proposed building site, leading to pollution concerns from traffic runoff/salt from snow removal. There will be difficulty to build the proposed retaining wall without damaging the mature trees, which currently provide privacy. Natalie says on page 15 of the planning justification report, it says lots 6 and 7, being 1031 Church and 1027 Church, currently contain an existing mature tree line to supplement the visual impact of the new proposed building. This tree line does not exist. We're categorically against the variances requested to build roads closer to our property than the guidelines allow for. The proposed minimum rear yard variance of 5 meters, being less than half of the required 12 meters, will infringe on enjoyment of our property and cause privacy concerns. That is the only email we have received, and it is 6:19 p.m.
Okay, so at this point, we can close the public portion of the meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So we now have committee input, and I see Mr. Olson, or Councilor Olson, you had your hand up again.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I still have some concerns about the water, simply because we're taking a very large part of this is going to be covered with hard services, including the roads, parking lots, sidewalks, and the building itself. I was going to ask a question about the roadways and the parking lot. Will they be urbanized, like with drains and gutters and that type of thing? Will they be the type of thing to take the water away and direct it to another place rather than onto somebody else's property?
Mr. Chair, through you, the preliminary conceptual site servicing plan does indicate that there will be on-site storage for water on this property underneath the parking lot. So there will be a system of catch basins and so forth and pipes to collect the water. And then that water will have to be released at the pre-development rate at which it to the current outlet. So that is something that, again, Public Works will review. It's part of the details at site plan stage. But at this early stage, the applicant has given some consideration about how that will be managed, and has provided kind of a preliminary plan in terms of how the stormwater will be managed. But that will be formally reviewed, and detailed design drawings will be submitted, but we have a sense of how it will be managed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Does anyone else on committee? Councillor Niznik?
Yes.
You can be proud.
Yeah, I
You can
know,
put your
okay.
hand.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if this is appropriate or in kind of the flow of the things, of how it goes, but, you know, the next step is that usually it comes to council for consideration for rezoning. So I'm just wondering if at that time we could make sure we have a detailed report from our Public Works with regards to what the strategy and plan is for drainage in that surrounding area, not just specifically with regard to this property. I'm not sure if that's doable, but I think sounds like it is really an important thing, especially with the grading differences. That's really a concern. And if there's already water concerns, then yeah, we need to make sure that that's not going to be a bigger issue. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. Certainly, we can ensure that when we come forward with a report, that it will provide some information on, you know, what is being contemplated for this site, but also what some of the other improvements are that will happen in the watershed area, so that there's a better understanding of how that stormwater is being managed.
Thank you, Ms. Weens. Any other questions at this point? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that brings us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that committee receive report 2023-176 for information as it pertains to file number AM-06-2023, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you for a vote.
So all those in favor? Seeing no opposition, I'll turn back to the clerk.
Thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Chair.
For the vote, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, so carried.
I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public, and that committee receive the email correspondence to the clerks@pelham.ca email address. To you, Mr. Chair.
All those in favor? No one opposed, so carried.
Thank you, and that brings us to adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned.
All those in favor? None opposed. This meeting is adjourned.